As we enter the second half, many of the trends that started in the first half and actually started in 2020 are still going to continue and get the primary focus of investors and politicians and policymakers in general. But the key one is the inflation aspect, and this has triggered a lot of different people to be on two sides of the fence. Are we going hyperinflationary like the 70s, or are we in a deflationary, disinflationary market, kind of like what we've been in since the 80s, late 80s, and so to speak? I think if you take a look at it, there's four layers of inflation. Asset inflation, which obviously you've seen in the market in the last year and a half. Secondarily, you start to look at input inflation. So you look at lumber and copper, and you've seen that actually have a significant impact. Then you take a look and say wage inflation. When we look at wage inflation, that's still just starting. You see it more anecdotally than you might see in some of the metrics, but it is starting to perk up there, and some of the headlines are really starting to show this. The last one is pass-through, and that's the thing that you have to be most cognizant of, because that's the cycle of where we get and how much that impacts the economic expansion. So why inflation is important is, think how subdued it's been. You think about the last 3+ decades of economic expansions. We've had 3 economic expansions. Their average has lasted about 98 months. Historically, the average is 64 months. During that time frame, it all has been during the globalization aspect. There's some very disinflationary, deflationary, a lot of technology improvements. So it's been a while since a economic expansion has been short-circuited by inflationary expansion or inflationary expectations. So it's really important to consider this as we move forward. I think when we start looking at how this impacts the markets, since a lot of people are kind of in a binary mode saying, hey, this is hyperinflationary, or maybe this is disinflationary, what if it's just in between there? What if it's a 2 to 3% inflationary market? And that's where we get into the Fed's comments about transitory. My feeling is that everything is transitory. It either recedes or we get acclimated to it. But for the second half of the year, we're going to get more concrete evidence of whether this is going to have a cycle that sticks through it inflationary, or does it recede. And my guess is some of the metrics will start to show that it's receding a bit, yet the underlying inputs, supply chain shortages, and shipping issues are going to show that inflation is actually still going to be a primary concern. And that's what we see in the second half of the year to make sure we're monitoring moving forward.